All right, this is breaking news this morning. There is a new report from the Washington Post that Fox News chief Washington correspondent James Rosen was investigated by the Justice Department in its effort to find a leak that they believed was occurring in the State Department. And this time, the DOJ was reportedly keeping track of a lot more than just phone records, as we heard about so much in the AP story. Obviously, we are looking into this morning. Brit Hume joins me now, Fox News senior political analyst. Brit, what's your take on what we know about this so far?
Well, Martha, this was a leak investigation that had to do with stories that the Post reports that our colleague James Rosen did back in 2009, and it had to do with North Korea. Information that the government claims came from a State Department official. And the activity that is described in this story is the normal activity. This is what journalists do. Journalists go to government officials and try to get them to tell them things. Now, and the government sometimes investigates to try to find out which official told someone something they weren't supposed to. All of that is perfectly normal. What is unusual in this case, Martha, is that the investigation spilled over into a search through, according to the story, James Rosen, our colleague and friend's personal emails. And in order to do that, Martha, the Justice Department went to a judge to get a subpoena for that. And the subpoena was issued, according to the story, because the Justice Department was alleging that the reporter in question, our colleague James, had engaged possibly in a conspiracy, a criminal conspiracy, which means, Martha, that the Obama-holder Justice Department is now prepared to treat the ordinary news-gathering activities of reporters trying to seek information from government officials as a possible crime.
Yeah.
That is, I'm not saying it's unprecedented because I can't, I haven't researched this, but I can't think of a case in which that's ever happened before, and it kind of takes the whole AP thing and casts a new light on that, of the attitude of this Justice Department toward the news-gathering activities of First Amendment-protected organizations.
It sure does, because the investigator on this from the FBI is quoted as saying that they are considering our friend and colleague James Rosen as a possible aider, abettor, and co-conspirator for covering a story about North Korea, saying basically that North Korea was considering doing some nuclear tests as a result of UN sanctions. That was the gist of the story that was being covered here. Now, in order to get this information, according to this report in the Washington Post today, they went to phone records, they went to the security badge analysis to test, when James and this person, Stephen Jim Woo Kim, who worked at the State Department, comings and goings with security badges, and also, as you say, got a search warrant for personal emails in this. Now, we obviously, you look at this in the context of the AP story, Brit, and I guess everybody, when we read that AP story, thought, gee, well, where else does this go? How much bigger is this than just AP? And maybe we're learning that this morning. Well,
perhaps we are. And what I would say about those things, you wear a security badge and you go in and out of the State Department, it keeps a record of that. That's not uncommon. That's true of buildings, both public and private around the country, where they have such badges. That's not unusual. And if they wanted to look at those records, I don't think there's any reason why they shouldn't have been able to do that. It does concern you a little bit if they're tracking reporters' movements, but they probably had a right to do that. Where this crosses, it seems to me, a clear and bright line is when they subpoenaed the phone records on the pretext, I would call it a pretext, even indeed possibly a pretense, that this activity was criminal. That places this administration in the position of saying that normal news-gathering activities of journalists are possibly criminal. Or are criminal. That is a little chilling.
It is chilling, and you look at the reason that they were looking into this State Department official, because he attended a briefing that I think about 85 people were at, and then shortly after that the story came out that was a confidential briefing, and they wanted to follow that. So you can understand why they would be, as you say, looking into that State Department official. The question is to why it would go further than that. And you think about the things that we've heard since this AP story broke, Brit, and how passionately the president feels about freedom of the press. That's something we've heard, and it raises the question about thoughts versus actions, words versus deeds, and how the administration actually behaves when it comes to these issues.
Exactly, Martha. It's interesting that the president has now come out and talked about, maybe we ought to have a shield law to protect journalists. In other words, he's saying we need a shield law to protect journalists from us, which is a peculiar position for a president of the United States to put himself in and his administration.
You know, obviously, we're just sort of tapping into the top of this story and beginning to understand it. But, you know, one of the questions that will come up is notification, because the AP is very outraged that they weren't notified. They say that this investigation into the AP was overbroad, and the standard, as I understand it, is that if there's a specific thing that you think is a threat to the American people, that would give you the right to go in for a search warrant and to do that without notifying the people involved. Do we have any idea where we stand on that issue?
Well, we don't know the facts here. There's a factual question, Martha, with regard to the AP story that's important, which is that the AP is saying, look, we went to the administration, we had the story, and we said, well, we're planning to go with this, and they said, please hold off because you'll queer the whole thing and you'll blow the source. Right. So they held off for a number of days. And then the administration said, you know, and they said, how about it? The administration said, well, we're going to announce it on Tuesday or something, so please hold off and let us announce it first. Well, if they're prepared to announce it, the announcement of the same thing the AP was reporting was going to have the same effect. Now, that does not mean that the AP getting the information isn't something that would trouble the administration. But if this is something they eventually were going to announce themselves, then it kind of takes the wind out of the sails of the argument that says this was vital national security secret, had to be protected, and it was a very severe leak, as Eric Holder claimed, one of the worst he'd ever seen. Right. So there's some factual questions that need to be resolved here, is exactly what really was going on and what the actual threat to national security was. Look, it's very clear, Martha, that the government has a right and even a duty to investigate leaks on their side of the divide. Where you begin to get into troublesome matters is when they try to get on the other side of the divide, where you have constitutionally protected activities of the press being the subject of subpoenas and sweeping looks at phone records and people's emails being searched through and so forth. That's a problem.
Quite a different story, indeed, and we'll continue to look into it, as I know you folks will in the Washington Bureau as well.
Right,
Brit, thank you so much. We'll see you later.
All the best.